Hello, and welcome to the Behavior Education Connection, the podcast that works to connect the world of behavior analysis and the world of education. We focus on topics important to behavior analysts who work in the public schools and those who support them. Join us and spend time gaining insights and ideas as our host talks with fellow behavior analysts as well as other experts in the field.
Hello and welcome to the Behavior Education Connection. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and today I am joined by Erin McCormick. Hi, Erin.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great. Do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name's Erin McCormick, and I am the behavior analyst for Fluvanna County Public Schools. I started as a special education teacher and then worked as a behavior specialist and have been working in Fluvanna for about 10 or 11 years, but directly as a Fluvanna employee for the past 5 years. And I've had a lot of fun and done a lot of cool things. And so I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. We're super excited to have you. So today we are talking about something that you have talked about previously, that you call the 4 powers applied daily ABA systems for public schools. So what does that mean?
So I actually kind of got roped into doing the convocation speech for Fluvanna this year. We were working on posters for the core values, and my amazing special education director, Jennifer Valentine, was trying to figure out how to use Canva. And I was like, I love Canva, send it to me. And so I ended up being a graphic designer and designing the posters. And then we started talking about what they mean. And I got excited and was like, we should do convocation around this because we didn't have a convocation speaker yet. And of course, that meant I was volunteering myself.
It's funny how you, when you volunteer an idea, what you're really doing is saying, I'll do that.
Yeah. And so it was a little stressful, but I think it came off really well, and it was really an important conversation for everyone to have at the beginning of the year. We had some awesome guest speakers who came on and talked about the importance of relationships and hope and grit and all these things. So it was really wonderful, and I think it helped everyone kind of start off the year on a positive note. And I think a lot of the things we talked about can also be applied to what we do every day as BCBAs in public schools, and also how we can help staff build those things in with students.
So what are the 4 powers, Erin?
So the 4 powers are the power of presence, which speaks to the core value of relationships, the power of trust, which is, again, core value of trust, the power of grit, which is work ethic, and the power of hope, which is optimism.
So let's take each of those and talk about what that has to do with school-based behavior analysis, if you don't mind. So the first one you said is the power of presence. So what does that have to do with school-based BCBAs?
Yeah, so presence is really about pairing and relationships. It's about us showing up for staff and staff showing up for students. We talk a lot about how as staff you have to pair with students and, make sure students feel safe and comfortable with you, make sure you're being consistent and you're being reinforcing, small things like greeting students at the door or sitting near them during independent work that is tough for them. Noticing their small successes and making sure that you're pointing those things out to them. And then as BCBAs going in and working collaboratively with school teams, it means, showing up in classrooms, not just when there's a crisis, checking in consistently, seeing how it's going, pointing out the great things that are happening when you go in, not just the things that you saw that they might require feedback on, but making sure that you are there and you're accessible to them. And I had someone call me, 10 minutes before this meeting and say, hey, are you available? I'm like, I have 10 minutes, but making sure you're answering that call when you can and saying, yeah, I can give you this 10 minutes. I can give you that time for that discussion. It's really about being there and showing up and being consistent with those things.
Yeah, I like that. We've talked about the power of relationships and pairing before, and I think it's a theme that comes back over and over again, is people need to know that they can call you and depend on you. Not that not that you're going to do everything for them, but sometimes people just need to feel that support, and I think that's one way that can happen.
Yeah, definitely. And it is hard sometimes because I think, especially being the only behavior analyst in a county, it's sometimes I feel like I need to do a lot of things for people. And that can help everyone fall into some bad habits, but at first that can be really helpful too. Like, hey, I know you don't know how to make this spreadsheet yet, so let me make one for you and let me sit down with you and show you how to do it. And maybe that's not my exact job description, but me taking the time to sit down and do that and build that rapport with that staff member is really helpful for them. And then it goes a long way in us having a good relationship to move forward.
Yeah, and then especially with teachers, I find because they have lots of people that come in and out of their classrooms, right? And you don't want to be another ship in the night, so to speak, which I think can happen as far as, well, now this person's here, and what are they going to tell me to do? Versus, oh, Erin's here. I've worked with Erin before. I know she has my best intentions at heart. I know she has my students' best interests at heart. So how can we work together?
Yeah, and we talk a lot about with students, if you're struggling with a student, like step back and build a relationship with them. Do 2 by 10, take 2 minutes for 10 days straight and get to know them and just talk to them. And sometimes I think as professionals, we forget that the teacher is our client too, and we have to take the time to do that with them. Sometimes my initial consult with a teacher who maybe didn't want to have an extra person come in or wasn't super excited to have somebody observing, it's just sitting down with them and hearing what they have to say and letting them vent and letting them get out all their frustrations. And sometimes it's me saying, how can I help you best? Even if I know the administrator wants me to do X, Y, or Z, I want to hear from the staff member. Like, what could I do to make your life easier tomorrow? What's one small thing that would help you? And sometimes it's a really tough match with a student, and we have to explore options for how everybody can kind of get breaks and have time during the day to kind of recoup if they're dealing with a lot of really difficult situations. But having that relationship with the staff member first is super important, especially when it comes to them being able to implement things that we're asking them to implement or, to go above and beyond and do something that might be a little bit out of their wheelhouse.
Yeah, and I think that actually dovetails really nice into the second one that you were talking about, which was trust. So what are you talking about here?
So trust to me is about consistency and predictability. It's about that reinforcement being predictable. It's about being consistent in the classroom. It's having those consistent expectations, having consistent routines that we're teaching kids, especially with our younger kids. We don't have those routines and expectations, and we're holding people, to a certain standard. It can be really difficult for them to know what we're expecting of them and what's going to come next. And that doesn't usually feel safe if we don't know what's going to happen and what's going to come next. It can almost even strengthen problem behavior sometimes when you have that unpredictability. So, having the relationship, but also showing up and staying when things get difficult. Trust is about like, hey, you're going to be here even after I had a bad day. So even after a kid does something that, can be really frustrating for us or can be really hard on staff, knowing that you're going to walk in tomorrow and have a clean slate and I'm going to be happy that you're here again. And just delivering on the things that we talk about. So if staff are, saying, hey, if you do this, you can get a break, not going, oh, hey, now they're working. Let's just keep going. Let's give them the break and show them that they just had to do that one thing and get a break. And then as BCBAs with staff, when we go in and we're working with school staff, it's, giving that reliable feedback and making sure the follow-up happens, which could be really difficult, to be fair. I think one of my biggest struggles is that I get so overwhelmed and have so many referrals, it can be hard to remember to go back and follow up with every single case and every single person. And sometimes I like to assume like no news is good news, but that's not always the case. So making sure, I'm taking the time to make sure I'm following up with people, even if it's just a quick email, like, hey, I haven't been able to get there, but I want you to know that I've been thinking about you. I want to see how it's going. Do you need me to come in? Let's schedule a time. And if I say I'm going to do something, doing it as soon as I can. If I say I'll create a visual schedule for you, I'm going to get that done. My goal is to get it to you by the end of the week. But if I don't, email me and send me a reminder, just letting them know that I want to be as reliable for them as they're going to be for students.
Yeah, and I like what you were talking about as we were talking about presence, that idea of, we're going to ask these folks to do things, right? And sometimes we are asking teachers or other staff to do things that may be a little out of their comfort zone, or maybe they don't know exactly how to do what we're asking them to do, or they're skeptical that it's going to be effective. And so I think that's where having that trust is really important so that you can say, trust me, but that's a hollow word when I don't have anything around that. I had a case one time. We had a kid who just was really struggling, and I asked the teacher to do some things that I knew were going to be kind of challenging, and she willingly, but also hesitantly agreed. And it was funny because we hit about February and she came back to me and she was like, "How did you know it was all going to work out?" And I was like, "Well, some of it is experience, but some of it's a little bit of luck, maybe. I'm not going to lie. But some of it was a lot of it, honestly, was just trust that you all could do what you needed to do. Thank you for trusting me that I'm going to be here to support you to make sure that this kid can have really positive outcomes."
Yeah, and it can be really challenging when teachers are already feeling overwhelmed, especially when I'm consulting on, students that are in the general ed classroom and it's just one teacher and it's 20 kids. They have to have a lot of faith in me that I'm going to create a plan or give them strategies that are actually feasible for them.
Right.
And sometimes even when I feel like I'm giving them, the most simple strategy I can, it can seem overwhelming to them. And I think part of what I've been able to do the past few years with having some behavior aides that work with me is, I'm not just going to leave you hanging to try this on your own. I'm going to send somebody in to model it for you and to spend the time that I can't necessarily spend making sure that you feel comfortable with it and that you feel, safe with the strategy that we've given you and that it's going to be effective. And that helps build trust, just knowing that we're not going to kind of leave them floundering out there trying to implement some strategy that seems daunting to them.
Right, exactly. All right, number three. Number three you talked about was grit.
So grit is, that persistence piece. This is a hard job, and being a teacher is an extremely difficult job. There's always a point in the school year I feel like where everyone is just like, oh my gosh, when is Christmas break? Or when is spring break? Or when is the end of the year? And you're kind of counting down. And it's not that we don't love what we do, it's just that it gets difficult. And staff are showing up every day. And that's what grit is. It's, this week's been a really hard week, and I'm still going to show up tomorrow. And I'm still going to try that strategy tomorrow. And maybe the kid is not where I want them to be, but we've made a baby step and I'm going to stick with it and continue to get those, successive approximations going and to shape that behavior to where I want it to be. And it kind of goes back to trust too, like trusting that, if we're saying we want this student to be in the classroom for 45 minutes and right now they can only spend 5, and if my recommendation is like, hey, let's try to get to 7, they can trust that, hey, that doesn't seem like a lofty goal to me, but we're doing these little steps. We're going to shape this behavior slowly, and being able to show up for that and put in that work every single day. And when we work with staff, it's, about practicing the same thing, showing up, if every single thing that we have tried to put in place has somehow failed, it's showing up again and again to say, all right, we're on to plan D. What's next? What can we do? How can we be creative? How can we think outside the box? I was in a meeting last week where everyone was kind of out of ideas and everyone's kind of looking at me like, okay, all right, behavior specialist, what now? And I'm just like, And so I thought, and I said, you know what? We're just going to have to kind of think outside the box. We know this kid has a trusted adult in another building. Can we have them come in and start the morning with them and just be creative with it and keep going when it doesn't seem like there's any solution left, or it doesn't seem like people are on board, or you go into that collaborative meeting and every comment is just negative and defeated. And, how do you keep going when you know that that's the mentality? And it goes back to that relationship piece and building the relationships and starting where they are and meeting staff where they are, and then reassuring them that you're going to be there, that they can trust you through the process. And that's kind of how people get to where they can put in that work ethic. They can have that grit to continue moving forward when it's tough.
Yeah, and I think this one is really important, particularly when we're talking about behavior, because the reality is, and we joke about this a lot, is we don't have a magic wand, right? There are no quick
Yeah.
fixes to behavior. It's going to take time. And I think if we go into any situation where we think, oh, well, tomorrow everything will be better because the behavior specialist is here, or because whatever the case may be, that's not real life. And
Yeah.
so I do think, as far as working with students and working with staff, this idea of grit is really important because we know it's going to take time. The interfering behavior didn't get that way overnight. And so the fix to it isn't going to happen overnight likely either. Although, wouldn't it be so nice if it did?
And sometimes it does. It only lasts for a day though.
Right. That's the other problem.
Yeah. And the same thing goes for when we're working with staff. A lot of my job is getting staff to change their behavior, which will influence the students' behavior. And that can be tough when someone's been doing the job for 30 years. And then here I come and I say, hey, don't say it that way. Say it this way, or say this instead of that. That's really hard for them to change, such an ingrained habit, or to change the way that they're thinking about the behavior and the way they're responding to it. And that's where the grit comes in, is I have to have some type of system in place where I can help this staff member remember that, and I can show up for them and make sure they're making progress and they understand the importance of it, and have that relationship to where they feel good and safe about trying to learn new things, and to maybe change some habits that weren't especially useful anymore.
Exactly. Well, and then that brings us to our fourth one, which is hope. And so why do we talk about this?
I think hope is probably the piece that like ties it all together. So it's about optimism. It's about, not having that negative mentality and not kind of falling into that rut of, never thinking anything's going to work, or I've tried everything and nothing has helped. And it's looking at, what are we doing to make sure that we do have some hope moving forward, that we can change something, that we can give this student a fresh start, that we can help them learn the behaviors they need to cope with the expectations in school. It's reinforcement, but it's also through that visibility, through showing up, through having the relationship, looking at the data and seeing, hey, I didn't think we were making any progress, but look, the duration of this behavior has decreased by, 2 minutes every week. And now we're at half of where we were. And without data and things like that, those pieces that we tend to bring to the table, sometimes staff do lose hope because they don't see that little bit of progress. They don't see that, the tantrum or the meltdown is slowly getting smaller and smaller with them implementing those strategies. So being able to show them that and show them the data and help them learn to take the data and look at on their own is really powerful, because when they do feel defeated, or when they feel like nothing they're doing is working, they can look back at that and say, oh, wow, wait, we are making a little bit of progress. Or I noticed when I use this strategy, the behavior decreased quite a bit. So now I know like which direction to move forward in to have that hope. And also just helping staff, give that to students, whether it's a visual cue to show them they're making progress with the work that they're doing, or, they're earning points towards something by meeting one of those behavior goals. They can see their growth. They can see that they're making progress. They can get that positive reinforcement, and that makes them excited to keep going with what they're doing.
Yeah, and I will tell you, for me, hope is actually the power of ABA. And what I mean by that is my science has never failed me yet. I may not always have the answer, but my science has never failed me. And so I always feel very hopeful of, okay, we can make a difference. We can make change. And I think if you lose that as a behavior analyst, I think it's tough. I think it's really tough if that's not how you feel, because I don't know how you go into working with a new client or a new case or a new team without the I have hope that we can make things better.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's especially working in public schools and knowing that there's literally a new challenge every single day. Or, you
Multiple,
might have
multiple.
something, yeah, like you might have something great going, and then, oh, hey, that staff member is moving to another position. It's like, oh gosh, we're starting over. And it can be easy to get defeated and to feel like, there's nothing we can do. And I see staff fall into that a lot, where they're kind of just giving up. They're just like, we've tried everything, there's nothing we can do. And either they're calling the principal every day, or the kid's getting sent home, or they're just kind of letting the kid do whatever they want, and they're not having any expectations for them because they just don't feel, optimistic about how they can interact and what they can do to support that student. And so when we go in, oftentimes hope is lacking. That's
Right.
not quite there. And we have to kind of like reinfuse that into the situation. And we do that with all the other powers, with the relationship piece, with showing up consistently and being able to empathize with people, and with showing that we're going to show up too. I'm going to send my, behavior aide for the next week to be in your room all day, every day, just to help you. And then when they see those things happening and they start to see those little changes in the behavior with that grit and that work ethic, then you can see that hope starts to kind of bloom again. And that is a huge part, I think, of what we do is seeing that happen and seeing teachers and staff and students kind of see that bright side again and be able to move towards, being successful and feeling confident that that's the direction they're going.
So, Erin, as we bring all four of these together, if you were talking to future BCBAs or people who are early in the field, what advice would you give them?
I think the biggest thing is just don't lose sight of the human piece, that we're all human beings, all the staff, all the students, all of us are human beings. And in order to work with other human beings, we have to embody these core values and of course others as well. But these are kind of the core, the bottom that we have to start at, and we have to be able to kind of infuse these things into every day and also be able to fall back on them when we're struggling. If we're having a really hard week or we get to that point in the year where we feel really burnt out and staff don't seem to be responding or willing and students are struggling and I get, 3 SOS calls in a day or 3 crazy things happen that they're calling me for, I have to be able to fall back on, okay, let's go back to these core values. Do I have the relationship with the staff to be able to help support them? Do they trust me? Does the student trust them? Are they trusting that their administration is going to support them? And how can we all put in the work to make sure that everyone is feeling optimistic moving forward and does have some hope? So it's just about falling back on these things when things get hard, and reminding ourselves and other people of those things and trying to constantly infuse them into what we do to be successful and to really be able to help other people, because it's hard to help other people if you aren't thinking about these things that are coexisting within all of us as humans.
I think that that's really great advice. And I think, anyone who's, well, actually, not just early in the field, I think anyone understanding what your core values are and knowing how they play into the work that you do, I really do think is very critical. So Erin, is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
I think just that when people do feel capable and safe and trusted, or that they can trust people and they feel optimistic, that's when people can grow, whether it's a student or a staff member or myself. If you have that kind of safety and you have the relationships, and that's when you can put in the work ethic and feel optimistic. And that's where you see big changes happen that, can be really awesome to be a part of.
I think that's a great note to end on. So Erin, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
This was a great conversation, and I hope our listeners enjoyed it. And to our listeners, we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Behavior Education Connection. Join us next time for another great conversation about behavior analysis in the schools. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. Sending out a special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for supporting our work. We look forward to connecting with you all again soon.